Hi everyone, thank you for tuning into the JPI's fundraising live stream. This is a quick reminder for you to click the link in our description below and donate to our COVID-19 crowdfunding campaign in association with Give India, Uplift and Ujala Foundation.
Today, we are joined by two overachieving JPI's alums, Simar Malhotra and Mehul Jangi. Thank you guys so much for joining. Simar is a Stanford graduate and Mehul is an incoming Caltech freshman. So they already have star-studded resumes. So what unites them is that they translate their personal experiences into condensed pieces of writing through their novels.
So they're both renowned authors. Simar has published 2 books titled Tides Don't Cross and There Is a Tide, while Mehul has published one titled Survival Sandstorm. Mehul has been a speaker at the Jaipur Literature Festival, and Simar has been awarded the revered Bacok Girard Award.
So I just wanted to get all of your perspectives on how you're making sense of this entire situation, because writers are stereotypically these introspective beings who process everything around them. So how are you making sense of all of this that's going around?
Okay. Yeah, so it's obviously a really bad time for everyone, right? Whether you're a writer or not is, very secondary. All of us have lost people that we love. Other people that we know are very, very sick. So, but before I get into that, firstly, kudos to you guys to, at a time where you can easily be really scared, just angered, you're trying to be productive, putting together this fundraising campaign. And that's truly exceptional. But there was this speech I'd heard a while back, and there's a poet called Brendan Kelly. And in one of his poems called The Book of Judas, he wrote that in order to serve your age, you must betray it, right? Which is essentially to say that in your time, to be able to contribute to it, to your era, do good for it, you need to be able to pinpoint its follies. You need to be able to, expose its issues. And I think as artists, as writers, we're uniquely, positioned to be able to do that, because we have that ability to sort of, create the content that can cause that stir. And I've always felt, and I've said this many times before, that there's 2 ways in which you can bring about change, right? One is through policy changes and another is through mindset changes. And that's what art does. And even today we see, so many of us lending our voices, calling out the government for all of its ineptitude. And that's really important at a time like this. There are ways in which, you deal with it. For some people, like writers, you put your emotions out there, try to make sense of the world in whatever way that you can. Other times you have kids like you who, put together fundraising campaigns and, contribute to your society in the way that you can. So yeah, I guess that those are little ways in which we try to make sense of what's happening.
That's brilliantly put, genuinely. And I think if Mehul can probably.
Right. So yeah, like Simar said, it's pretty great how you're still so motivated to actually help other people and you doing this fundraising campaign. And yeah, like it's an incredibly hard time for almost everyone around us. I am hearing news about people testing positive and people actually passing away every single day. So it's alarming and frankly, it's a bit hard to believe right now because it all happened so quickly and the first wave wasn't anything like this. And that's pretty interesting because when the first wave actually started, I remember reading this Reddit post on how this a Reddit post by an Italian man who talked about how COVID started in Italy. So he basically described it as something that was very distant at the start, how there were very few cases and the government wasn't actually paying that much attention to COVID in Italy. And then all of a sudden, within a span of a week, suddenly people around him started testing positive and people around him started dying. And like the first time COVID happened, I thought that that's how it would go in India. And it sort of felt like a story to me, how stuff is progressing so quickly and how cases are growing so exponentially. And it didn't happen like that the first time. But now during the second wave, the exact same thing is happening. Cases are increasing exponentially. So like I feel like this is in some ways some sort of story coming true because it's been something I've read from other people's perspectives online. And finally it's happening to me. So yesterday one of my dad's friends tested positive, and the week before that one of my dad's other friend's mom tested positive. So again I'm seeing that exact same thing, that exact same loop, where every single person around me is testing positive, and every single person around me is suffering both mentally and physically from COVID. Physically in the sense that the lockdown has really restricted us, and it's, and like as a GPAD, I've seen many students start fitness clubs and other sorts of clubs to help connect people and make sure that students in our school still have that very strong sense of community. And it's like, it's frankly very I don't know what the word for it is, but I would say amazing to see how GPI still, like GPS is still a family despite all of everything that's happening. And so yeah, like that's the way I'll put it. That's my perspective on it.
That's definitely brilliantly put, because you can weigh in with two perspectives. I've known that you are a very data oriented person and a very introspective person. I think you have blogs in Python and are making sense of like a lot of data. So that definitely puts a lot into perspective. I think Tina wants to have a question.
Yeah, so getting into the whole writing process, writing is a very attention intensive process, right? So, how do both of you get into the flow and the state of while you're writing, and how do you stay in the flow for large chunks of time, for large periods of time?
I think like the logistical aspect of the writing process for me, in that sense, I think I'm a creature of routine. I need to be in the same place. I just want quiet. Unlike a lot of people who are able to like travel, go to cafes, sit down, and like suddenly creativity sparks and stuff like that happens. It never works for me. In college, I used to have this one blue beanbag that I invested a lot of money in. In retrospect, it feels pretty not a great buy, but in any case, all of my writing I only did over there. At home, it's always my bed. But in terms of like the creative process and just like being in the zone for a while, I think that is it's become increasingly more haphazard. And I think a lot of that has to do with the stuff that's going around you, because mentally you're not at peace, at least in the past. None of us have. And sometimes, especially like being a fiction writer, you can sometimes lose purpose. You can just be like, I am working on a story right now, with characters that don't exist, and there are people out there who are dying. So it's kind of like telling your brain that what you're doing is important, even at a time when there is a pandemic going on. It's a global national crisis. That sometimes has an effect on the way that you're thinking. The way that I've sort of gone about it is that I consider every piece of writing a free write. So it puts less pressure on the work to be perfect and for it to, sound good and whatever. There's just like stuff on paper, and then the editing process comes later, which I enjoy more, I think, than the writing process. But in any case, yeah.
Just to follow up, I'm really curious about how writers actually think before writing a story. Are you more of a paper thinker? Like, I think Richard Feynman, the great Nobel physicist, would say that his pen and paper are extensions of his arm. So are you a paper thinker or a laptop thinker? Like, what is your dynamic in that?
I think I'm a paper thinker. So my brainstorm happens at whatever random hour, 3 a.m. You wake up and you're like, oh wait, like this makes sense to me. So you like scribble on a notebook. But then I'm like a computer laptop writer. Yeah. So for me to be able to write, I have to type it. But if I'm just thinking, I'm like doodling, okay, making arrows, this, that, all of that happens on paper.
Definitely. Mehul, like I think Simar Didi mentioned how she would buy a beanbag and just write there. So do you have any quirky writer habits of that sort as well?
Like I'm not that location or time oriented as a writer, but like 90% of the writing I do is more about the thinking part of what I'm going to write rather than what I am writing. And so when I actually do start writing, it's just like creating a sort of translation between my head and the screen in front of me. So it doesn't feel like I'm creating anything when I'm writing. It only feels like I'm already translating something that's been created. So I'm that sort of person who imagines stories rather than thinks ideas. So like, for example, when writing my book, I would think about a specific scene and I would try to describe that scene in the best way possible, how it would play out. And so I'm that sort of visual to text thinker. And yeah, like I'm not location oriented at all. So I, like, instead of having a specific place or a specific time, I sort of just zone out when I have that image ready. And like I write very spontaneously. I've never had a set time or anything. Even while writing my book, I, like, there were big patches in between around 2-3 weeks long when I didn't write anything at all because I couldn't develop any sort of imagery as to what was going on. And then there were patches, like 1 week long patches, where I wrote what 30% of the book in like 6 hours flat, because it's it's very random with me. It's very spontaneous. Like there's no trigger behind it. It's just like the only thing that motivates me to write is whether or not I already have that image ready in my mind. So it's like you'll hear a lot about books being turned into movies these days. So it's the opposite for me. I'm consciously trying to turn a movie that's already in my head into a book that other people can read.
Yeah,
That's very coolly put. And just listening to you both, it's got me a little excited. Can we expect any new books in the summer? Is there any chance this summer you're releasing any?
2 months from now. uh, maybe not this summer. Hopefully next summer.
Okay, Mehul, what about you?
So I was supposed to work on the sequel to my first book, but I ditched that idea. And I've been thinking a lot about doing something in science fiction lately. And I've started 2-3 different manuscripts already, but I, I started like 50 manuscripts in my entire life, and I always end up ditching them. So there's no guarantee about anything.
Oh, okay. Just one particular question to Simar. Correct me if I'm wrong. Saying that you used to maintain a journal every day, you would be writing in a journal. Firstly, is that true? And second, which particular observation while writing in that journal changed that whole perspective into becoming a writer and turning it into a novel?
But no, yes, I journal. And I think journaling was basically how I got into writing in the first place. There is a Tide, which was the first book that came out. It started off as a journal. A large chunk of that book has autobiographical elements. So in that, there's a character who goes to the US, does a summer program at Yale. I happened to go to the US, do a summer program at Yale. I'm not saying I was that character, but a lot of those experiences ended up finding their way into the book because I had journaled, extensively about them. So I think it sort of became a story through the process of me like revisiting the journal and then trying to maybe like make it a little bit more exciting and adding elements of drama and this and that. And then of course like the stuff that was happening around me in Delhi, which was the Anna Hazare movement and such. So I think that journaling really does help. And as a writer, I feel like the only time I'm able to call myself a writer confidently is when I am writing. So if I have like a long period of like 1 month of not having written anything at all, then I feel like I'm lying and being fake. I'm not actually writing. So how can I call myself a writer? So the whole journaling process, helps to keep that brain sort of, working in that, let me put words on a sheet of paper manner. Yeah.
Beautifully put. Mehul, I know your book was more of a historical fiction, but are there any elements of your reality into the characters you kind of crafted in your story?
There's nothing that I've personally got from my experiences that I put directly into the story, but like I based each of the characters off from some very prominent traits that you'll see in like fiction these days. So for example, the main character was very strong-willed, and there's the cliche guy who runs away, the cliche hostage. But from my personal experience, I like looking back, some of the elements of the book are very like some things can be used against me because there is no female character in the entire book. There's just male characters. And like I didn't like that's how I was back then. So I can't really say anything about that. But yeah, there's nothing as say that's directly from my personal experiences.
I mean, I guess that makes sense. You were much younger when you wrote those books, so I'm sure your next book will be a much more diverse.
But this might as well be the start of your testimony. Who knows?
So my next question to you is, for any aspiring authors watching this, could you walk us through the entire process from like ideation to writing to the actual publishing of the book with a realistic time frame of how long each step took you to complete?
So as I said, the first one came about somewhat accidentally. There was no, I didn't have a project in mind. I wasn't working on it to write a novel. It's, I journaled a lot. I was, I think, missing my time at Yale, and then it sort of came about. And then when I was maybe halfway through, like 50, 60 pages, I guess that's a little less than halfway, then I was like, okay, I've invested time, and perhaps if I do it a little bit more seriously, then it could become a thing. And I guess that's when I started working on it more diligently. In terms of like the writing process and how long it took, I think that's very, it depends on the extent of your plot, how much time you're willing to put. Some people are slow writers. So I feel like it's hard to put like this much time you should like finish a novel in kind of a thing. But I took about a year-ish. And then even with the publishing process, there's no one in my family. I'm not from the industry in any capacity. So all I did was literally Google publishers in Delhi, and I sent emails to all of them. And then they asked for the manuscript. Before the manuscript, they asked for the synopsis of the book. If they enjoyed the synopsis, and they asked for the first 3 chapters to sort of see what the writing style was like, whether it was flowing. And then after the first 3 chapters, they asked for the entire manuscript. That went through, I think, 3 or 4 rounds of screening. And then, they decided, okay, let's pick this book. So that's usually kind of how it goes with traditional publishers. And after that, the editing process begins. So you either hire your own editor or your publisher gives you an editor, and then you work together on bettering the book. If there's like a plot element that the publishers think that, maybe the audience is not going to love it, you want to consider tweaking it, and then you make that decision yourself, whether you're okay changing that part, not okay changing that part, etc. Yeah.
Definitely, Mehul.
Yeah, so like I started writing in 7th grade, but I didn't do that much. I didn't do that much of the writing part in 7th grade, and around 7th and 8th start, so my book is about 30,000 words long. So the first 20,000 words I wrote during the entirety of 8th grade. And like I took a lot of time writing. And as I said before, there were large patches during which I didn't write at all. And then like, I would write a lot during a single week or even a single day. And the last 10,000 words were sort of like my parents, they just felt like I was developing a hobby or a passion at the start. But when the book actually became something they could, like they spent a decent amount of time reading, and then they felt like it would more than be a passion for me. They felt like it would help me in my future and for my college application and everything. So they sort of pressurized me into writing the last 10,000 words so I could publish it more quickly. And like I don't mind that at all, because that just motivated me into finishing it sooner. And like looking back, that was very integral to finishing the book on time, because like, I feel like I would have been like, as soon as I hit 10th grade, then I would have started going back, and I would have like my inner perfectionist would have come out, and I would have edited again and again. It wouldn't have come out if they hadn't pressurized me into publishing it at the start of 9th grade. And the publishing aspect took way more time than the writing part for me. So it started, I went to JLF in the year 2019 as a speaker, and the year before that I was an attendee. So in 2018, as an attendee, I went up to different stands where representatives from different firms had come, and they had this form thing which you could fill out to submit your manuscript, and then they would review it. And so that's how I initially approached publishers, and one publisher that surprisingly, one of the largest publishers, Scholastic, sticked, and they helped me a lot. And they were
We would love it if you could finish your answer about how the publishing process really ended for you.
so yeah. And like I was talking about the editing process and how it took a way longer time span than the writing part. So like in the 2018 JLF, I went up to different publishers and I talked to them about how I had written, like I had started writing a book. And while writing the later parts of my book, I sent the first 3 chapters and the synopsis and the summary to all the publishers present there. And 2 firms reached out to me. So one was Scholastic, that's a pretty big publisher, and the other one is Pirates. They're from Jodhpur, and they're a very small, like they were very small at that time. So Scholastic actually said that they'll take up to 8 months to review and then finally process, and that the publishing part would take place almost a year later, all the editing and reviewing combined. And Pirates said that they would help me edit my book in around a month, and I could reach the publishing part in roughly 1.5 months. So I decided to choose Pirates over Scholastic because the main aim I had with my book, like when it got finished, was to actually have it out there rather than have a massive audience for it. Because I know that Scholastic would have promoted it a lot, but I genuinely just wanted to see the product of the effort I'd put in over the last 2 years. So that's the main reason why I decided to choose the smaller firm. But yeah, like people have different aims. So if you if you're someone who wants a larger audience and who's basically trying to communicate, for example, if you're writing a non-fiction book, then a publisher like Scholastic would be way better, because like the purpose of your book would then obviously be to connect with the people you're talking to.
Definitely.
So yeah, that's about it.
Simar Didi, a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
As a Stanford graduate, what advice would you give to students about school versus college life? Is it different? And if so, how?
Is it different? It's very different. I think college and school, you have the support system of teachers who really, really care about you, especially at JPIS. They're there, guiding you throughout. You make errors, mistakes. They're there constantly there to, assist you. College, you have professors and TAs who will do that, but you're still, on your own. I think, although, I truly feel the kind of exposure that we get at JPIS, so it's fairly similar to what you would get in college, because the clubs that you all have are, there's like in college, it's pretty much like in the same direction. But of course, along with studies and such, you have the tension of doing laundry and ensuring your food is cooked and all of that. So those are very small, irritating things that you probably think are not going to, have any sort of a tangible impact on you, but it weighs you down a little bit. But it's all part of the process. But yeah, I think with college, a lot of us think of like an education as a means to an end. Like we go to college, we get this degree, and then the next step is we're gonna go into a career that's that we think our degree is suited for, or whatever. And I think in that process, we sometimes forget to think about an education as just an education. Like you study for the sake of studying, you learn for the sake of learning, and I think that's the most important part about college. It's like it teaches you the ability to think, the ability to learn, because most of the stuff that you learn in the classroom setting, you're never going to apply that when you're starting your own business, or if you're doing engineering. Like that's what you learn in your classroom is not what you're going to be working on when you get your first job. But what it does help you with is, as I said, communication, perseverance, adaptability, learning to learn, I think is very important. So yeah, and then the sort of network that you inherit in college is probably the most important, of your friends, of your professors, the alumni. They're always there to sort of propel you in the directions that you want, and that's very empowering.
Definitely. both of you touched upon the entire process of the publishing, and I think before books are actually published, uh, like you said, you have to go through a rigorous process of like rigorous editing, and I'm sure like both of you would have got some harsh criticisms about, like, both of you don't need any harsh criticisms, but you know tendencies of professionals, but could you shed some light upon how you dealt with those criticisms and how made your way through them?
So, like, one thing that I distinctly remember is, like, so my publisher told me about this editor, and he asked me if I can submit a chapter, and he'll give me a sample document of how he edits the entire thing. So I was expecting it to be like 5 changes per page or something. I didn't really have an idea of what it would be like. And when my manuscript actually came back, he had changed basically every single sentence. There were around 150 changes per page. So that was very shocking. And like, I was very young at that time. So that to me just felt like a very harsh reflection on how I didn't write well. But like, after that, I wanted to know if that's how editing works, and I talked to my publisher about it. And it turns out that, like, I didn't write well at that time. I was an eighth grader, and I didn't have that command over language as I do now. But yeah, like, that's one thing I remember. And definitely, if some aspiring writer is trying to, like, gets an editor for his book, then the first thing that does happen is, like, the shock or the surprise at seeing just how different your book can be made by another person while it retains the same story.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I'm when it comes to writing, I'm very open to criticism. That might not be true for like other aspects of my life. But when it comes to writing, I want people to give me constructive, critical feedback, because I think that is pretty much the only way in any sort of creative arts that you can better yourself. Yeah, so that's one part. I'm okay with harsh criticism when it comes to writing, but I've had a weird experience with an editor. I wasn't as generous though as Mehul was, because they sent me back the manuscript and they changed all of the language. And I think as a writer, like, you choose, right, whether you're okay with that or not. And as a writer, like, your language is literally the only thing that's yours, because ideas you can borrow from people, from like the world around you, this and that. But if you completely change my language, then it's not mine anymore. So I wasn't okay with that. And I like undid all of the edited work, and I, asked my publisher to get me another editor who wouldn't like change literally like all of the words, because yeah. But also another note for like aspiring writers, there are a lot of organizations now, like Bound India and Pothi, who are there to like assist aspiring writers, find publishers, find editors. They look over your manuscripts and everything. So I think the whole like process of getting published, of writing, like finding people who will contribute well to your work, that's become a lot easier. So definitely like check out organizations like Bound and Pothi and such. They help with distribution and such also.
Awesome. Okay, so my next question to you guys would be, both of you are obviously going to renowned university, Stanford. I mean, Simar's graduated, but Mehul's about to enter Caltech. So one of the major aspects of an application are your essays. And as writers, I'm sure you might have looked at it differently. So what advice can you give to us when we're writing our college essays, which will be in the next 6 months, I think? And anyone else also, just our friends watching this and other students who are going to be applying this year?
Mm-hmm. I think authenticity is probably the most important part of your essay, because all of you are probably applying to similar schools, right? Your portfolios, because you're working on group projects, your portfolios aren't so different from each other. Like, you're all working on a fundraiser together, you're doing like clubs together. The only thing that differentiates you from another person who has a similar profile is your essay. So sort of tuning in to whatever it is that you're talking about, whether it is like a group project that you're talking, why is it like, what makes it specific to you, I think is very important. So tune into like that personal aspect of it. It can be a very small issue, but if it's yours, then no one else can replicate that. So authenticity and making it very specific to just you, I think is very important. That's the only way you can be different from other people. And please, like, send your essays to every person that you can find to give feedback. Feedback is the most important.
Yeah, so like I agree with Simar on the authenticity part. That's definitely the single most important part of your essays. And like she said, it's the only thing that differentiates you from another similar applicant. So they're really very important. Uh, Personally, I've always thought of the essays as not as not as ways to communicate with the college, but rather a way to tell your AO some story that you've been through, anything that you've been through. It's a way of like I would say it's a way of turning your entire life into a story, and you taken into college on the basis of how attractive that story is. So if you're writing about something you do, then that won't be as impactful. For example, if take person X and person X opens an NGO, then if you're talking about that NGO, then that essay is not really about you. The NGO might have a really good story, and the NGO might have been through a lot of change, and there's a lot of stuff you can understand from the change that the NGO went through. But the AO isn't admitting the NGO. The AO is admitting you. So you need to talk about how that NGO changed you, and not how you changed that NGO, if you get what I mean. A lot of people focus on how their activities or how their extracurriculars change them, but I think college essays should be about how their activities and how everything they've done has changed the person themselves. And like Simar said, it's very important to send your essays to people and get feedback. I've read a lot online about how you shouldn't share your essays at all, and how it's very risky considering people can copy it, but I don't feel like that's true at all. Because the number one thing is that if your essay is about you, then there's no way any person can take that and make it about himself or herself or themselves. So yeah, like I guess that's all I have to say. Just tell a story and make sure it's about you and your change.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. I think Krish has a question.
Yeah. So one question to the both of you. I mean, another advice, if you can go on with one more advice. How do you balance extracurriculars and academics in a way that you don't harm either one? Like both of them are growing, both of them are benefited.
I think you just allocate time for different things. And with extracurriculars, that comes from a place of passion, right? You don't want to spend your time doing something that doesn't give you pleasure. Academics, padai, that's something you have to do. Your parents put that pressure, your teachers put that pressure, you put that pressure yourself sometimes. But with your extracurriculars, I think it should always come from, a place of love. And when that's true, then I think you're always able to find time. But at the same time, if you, passion and love is one thing, but time is again limited. So I think being able to schedule your day in a way that allows you to do that along with your work is probably important. And it's at the end of the day, it's about inculcating a discipline, right? Whether it's like sport, you go for your coaching and classes and whatever, it tires you and everything, but you still do it every day. You follow through. Yeah, I think at the end, it's just about that, following through, maintaining the discipline, and figuring out what is it that fuels you. What is helping you grow, what is giving you sort of this like happy energy that allows you to do well even in your academics.
Yeah, so like again, as Simon said, it's very important to have a schedule where you can balance both things out. Like, and I genuinely feel like if you've got subjects that you're studying in school that you're passionate about, and then you've got extracurriculars that you're doing outside at home, or like if you're playing something and you're passionate about, then they both start growing together. For instance, I'm extremely passionate about computer programming and computer science in general, but I've never like I had CS in 9th and 10th. That wasn't really very intense, and it wasn't proper CS. And I didn't take CS during 11th grade. But if and CS has been more or less of an extracurricular for me because it's never been something I've done in school. So, but it's never felt like an extracurricular. It's always been something that I'm very attracted towards. And if you would ask me the subject I'm strongest at, or the subject I feel like I'm strongest at, then I would say CS. And I think some people would find it surprising seeing how I've never done it in school and I've never been under any teacher's guidance. But not being in school and doing it as a passion has like helped me find my own way in it, and I've basically developed my own path through CS. So instead of following some curriculum or some syllabus, had I've had this insane world of possibilities, and I've had anything. Like there's literally 50 different things you can do at any given time if you know the basics of programming. So that's just helped me advance a lot in programming, and it's helped me recognize the fact that it's something I'll be doing in the future. And I applied for CS at Caltech, and they took me in despite knowing that I hadn't studied in school. So like then again, I feel like my passion for CS is just like it's the one thing that defines me so much that I feel like it represents me as a person. Even in an application where CS hasn't been something I haven't done in school, CS has been the defining quality of that application. It's been something that connected to each of my essays. And I talked a lot about how I would be in the CS room at school, not studying, but actually solving problems and sometimes helping people or sometimes letting my seniors help me. So once again, once your academics and your extracurriculars start becoming passionate, after a certain point, so initially you're just exploring certain things. Like I've started playing basketball, I left it after a week because I didn't enjoy it. So you were initially exploring, but after that, it very gradually starts becoming it starts going from just an exploration to something that you will be doing consistently over a long period of time. So I feel like it's okay to have like 30 extracurriculars right at the start of grade 9. There's no problem with having 30 ECs, but you need to refine it down. And once you're doing things you're passionate about, then time isn't that much of a problem. You'll start finding your own time for things and you'll start developing your own routine.
Definitely. And I think we've heard so much about Mehul having this infamously ridiculous time schedule. I think you time block every 30 minutes of your day, right? If I'm not wrong. I've heard that from seniors.
Yeah, so like I read about this in Elon Musk's book. He had this schedule where he broke his entire day into 5-minute chunks, and he assigned a specific task to each 5-minute chunk.
Yeah.
And he did that like over the course of 20 years. So he just became sufficient at it that at the end of that 20-year time span, he could accurately do every single task he had for each chunk. And I tried to do that, but with 30-minute chunks, not 5-minute chunks. And that was only for preparing for my IGCSE. So I assigned a subject to each 30-minute chunk. And back then, some of these subjects I didn't find interesting at all. There was English literature and French that I wasn't that I wasn't that happy studying those subjects. So a system like this helped me study them. Like for example, if like you before that I just studied what I wanted to, like I would do math or chemistry. Those are things that I like, but I never really paid any attention to French or English. So I had to like in ninth grade I got like I remember 70% or something in French. So I had to go from that 70% to something that like I feel like I'm proud about. And I went from a 70% to a 93 because of that schedule. And like it's not that I had some hidden talent for French or anything. It's just that I actually started doing it rather than ignoring it the entire time.
I still can't fathom how you can still stick to that schedule. I can make like 5 different timetables, but I barely make it through like 4 days following that schedule. How do you condition mind into just complying to that timetable?
So like it's not your schedule doesn't just have to explain all the stuff you're studying. There you also need to have patches of playing a sport or relaxing in it. Like my schedule 30 would be 24 hours split into 30 minutes, so I would take out time from 5 to 6 p.m. to play cricket with my neighbors, and I would take out an half an hour every night to make the schedule. And after making it, I would just wind back and listen to music or do something that just helped me feel more relaxed. On Sundays, I would take out 4 to 5 hours continuously to play video games or something, because like I just the main reason I like playing video games is because they occupy my attention span entirely. If I'm playing something, then like nothing else exists for me during the time for which I'm playing. So that just helped me distract myself from studies when necessary.
That's wonderful. I'm so sorry. I just got in the flow and just asked him some follow up. Sorry, Simar.
No
No, not at all. This is very interesting. I am a very terrible schedule follower. So I'm motivated to, and I'm going to see if this 30-minute thing can work for me. So like
We're
30
on the
minutes
same
might
boat.
not. I'll do like 1 hour chunks maybe. It'll be easier.
Definitely, we're on the same boat. But considering you're a Stanford graduate, it's difficult to process that anyway. But
I think following schedules and going to a university have literally no relation.
really,
I mean, I have a lot of trouble following timetables and schedules.
wow,
Yeah.
that's
So you do not think that if you go to like a good school, something miraculous will happen and your basic instinct and your basic person is going to change. It's hard. You have to put in a lot of effort. If you're as motivated as Mehul, then probably maybe I'll try this now. We'll see if it works.
Simar, I have a question for you. You graduated Stanford. So so in like 4 years, I know my sister's going to graduate university and she's a little confused about the whole placement process. Once you do graduate university in that final stage in the last year, when you have to, talk to companies and talk to your alumni, anyone who can, your placement committee, etc., that can get you your first job. So what is that entire process and what is some advice you would give to anyone?
I think what ends up working is, as I said before, it is your network. It's your alumni, because they're always happy to help, current students. Everyone is a helpful person in the world, I like to believe. So, you just need to be open enough to reach out to people. I think because, most of us, when we end up going to like these big schools, we've already been like, high achieving students in school. We've done everything by ourselves. We've just like managed by ourselves, right? And I think it's important to open your mind to seeking help when you need it. And when it comes to the whole placement process and everything, especially for internationals, because it gets a little bit harder because of the whole visa process and everything. Opening yourself up to reaching out to different people, talking to them, trying to understand like what a day in their life is, to truly like figure out whether this is the kind of work that you want to do. If this is something that will give you happiness, or just like make you feel like you're contributing to the world effectively, I think is important. But yeah, and your school also has a lot of resources, right? You have like the career center, you have like older if you're seeking internships, for instance, you have seniors who can help you out. You have friends of friends who are either running startups or they worked at a place and they can always refer you and such. So it's a daunting process, but you get over it. You learn and fail a little bit sometimes, but eventually, in retrospect, you're like, okay, it wasn't so bad. Yeah.
Definitely. I think it's been such a joy talking to both of you. We've lost track of time, but I think we definitely would want to ask you two last questions. I think Krish could ask the one question, and then I could follow up with the final question.
So a very simple question. It's simple, but it's difficult to do. How does a writer overcome the period called a writer's block?
I can go first because I have been in that period for a while. No, I think a writer's block only, the reason that it occurs is because of the kind of pressure that you put on yourself, right? A writer's block, I mean, it's a block because you expect yourself to do something and that's not happening. And once you're able to take the expectation off of the work, just writing isn't hard. Like you're constantly writing emails and like talking to your friends over text and whatever. So writer's block is essentially, you not feeling what you're doing is good enough. And once you're able to, sort of distance yourself from that, knowing that editing is a separate process. and that writing is like the first step to it. I think that can be helpful for people. So as I said even earlier, for me, thinking that everything that I'm writing initially is a free write is helpful, because a free write is essentially a stream of consciousness. So whether you're thinking of like a story and you have characters, or it's your journal or whatever, at that point you're not writing keeping in mind an audience, or thinking, okay, what will someone who reads this going to think, and once that pressure is off, there is no block. Then you just write, and then you edit after that, and that's the way you should go about it.
Definitely. And Mehul really talked about his parents trying to nudge him towards just writing what however he can. But could you Mehul, maybe take us through what you were thinking while your parents were nudging you towards writing, and how you were tackling the writer's block?
So I feel like writer's block happens when there is a difference between what you're writing and the expected outcomes of what you're writing. So if I'm if I want to write to appeal to a certain audience, for example, if I want to write just for the sake of finishing my book and for the sake of my parents feeling relaxed that I finally finished my book, then there will be some level of writer's block, because I can't write just for the sake of it. As I said before, it's like a movie that I'm translating into a book. And writer's block for me would happen when I can't think of what's happening in the future. So I if I'm writing a story, then I try to plan about what will happen next in the story, and then I try and develop some imagery about what's happening, and then I'll try to write that down. And that's a very simple solution for me. But in the last 2-3 years, I've been blogging more than I've been writing actual stories, and I faced a lot of challenges in actually consistently writing blog posts. There was this phase last year where I would write almost every week, but I haven't as of now I haven't written a single post in around 6 months, and I've basically been without any ideas for 6 months. So I can't talk about how to get out of it because I'm currently inside that writer's block phase. But in the past, this habit of imagining something and then writing what I've imagined down is something that helps me.
And I want to add one more thing. I think, and this is true not just for writing, but any sort of creative medium that you're in. What can help is deciding on something and then having a deadline for it, because sometimes you need to remind yourself that you can do it. It doesn't have to be good, it just has to be. And once you're able to complete something that you've set your mind to, just knowing that you're able to do it is empowering enough for you to instill that confidence in yourself again, that if you put your mind to something, you're able to complete it, then you can do better things too.
Definitely. And the point about, I love how you point out that we should set up intentional deadlines, and that just really highlights the point about Parkinson's law, that the time you allocate to one task just fills it to how much ever time you allocated. And that's definitely beautifully put. So for one last question to both of you, I would love to gain an insight of how creative thinkers like you actually process the world around, and how can one normal person who doesn't really try to make sense of every single thing around him gain insight so as to how to observe a world through a writer's lens, and how they can leverage that insight into their own observations and their own personality development?
I think people who are not writers, they have this very glamorized sort of image and perception of people who write. They're like, oh, these are writers, so they must perceive the world in this crazy, interesting way. That's not always true. I think writing is essentially about noticing the small things, and there was something I read, I can't remember it verbatim, but basically the idea is that with writing, it's like if you're looking at a tree, you have to keep looking at it such that there is no other tree that can resemble that tree for you anymore. So at the end of the day, it's just specificity. And if you can find specificity in all of the ordinary things that you're, observing, I think that's in a lot of ways that informs my worldview. It's the little things that sort of hit you when you're reading something interesting, things that you might not notice, but then that those exist. So when they're articulated in words, as a reader, then you're like kind of slapped in the face, or you're provoked, or you're angered. And yeah, it's the noticing. And what helps, I think, is keeping a tiny notebook with you wherever you go, or like notes on your phone to ensure that you don't forget. So there are like boring, sort of less exciting aspects of it. That okay, now you make a note, okay, I've seen a tree and no other tree should look like this tree. But it's all part of the process. It's less glamorous than it seems. So we package it up nicely. We're good marketeers.
Beautiful, beautiful. And if Mehul could finish us off and follow to that amazing answer.
So yeah, like I don't think there's any such difference between how like I would perceive the world and someone else would perceive the world. But like one thing that I do know is that like comparing myself to my friends, I do appreciate books way more than they do. And I think like that's partly because I read a lot. I've been reading a lot for a very long time. And I think that's something anyone who talks about me brings up every time they're describing me. And I don't know why, but like people just associate the word books with me. All my classmates do, and all of my friends do. And yeah, like appreciating books has helped me a lot as a writer. Like actually thinking about the stories other people have written, and actually thinking about the worlds other people have created. I feel like that's very beautiful, and appreciating books is something that helps you across all aspects. So like one thing that I remember reading, I don't know if any of you have read this book. It's by a Chinese author called The Dark Forest. I don't know the name of that Chinese, I don't know the pronunciation of that Chinese name, but in English it's known as The Dark Forest. So that book talks about a guy, and he's married to a person who's a writer. I don't know the name of both characters. I can't recall. So the writer basically talks about how she imagines not just the characters as they are, but she imagines the characters from the moment they were born to the moment they will die. So even if she's talking about the characters in their 20s, she imagines the characters in a way that she knows what happened throughout their entire lifespans, but the readers only see the slice of the character that was present during her 20s. So that's what's very beautiful about it, because writing is like, it's like there is a whole world that had a start and a finish, but you're taking out a certain slice from it and you're telling a story only about that slice. So like as a writer, I can appreciate the past and the present that I think every story has. And like that's how I perceive the world around me. If I see an image, I think about the past and the present and not just the slice that I'm seeing. And that's a perspective that I only have because of reading that book. That it's one of my favorite books now because of just because of that story. So yeah, like that's my input on this.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Simar and Mehul, for joining us today and enlightening us about your experiences and the entire writing process and so much more. I'm sure everyone watching this will be able to take back some key lessons that they can begin inculcating into their lives, whether it's to become a better writer or just a more well-rounded person. So thank you guys so much once again for taking out time from your busy schedules. You both are inspirations for the three of us, and I'm sure the same can be said for all of our viewers. And once again, thank you for tuning into the JPI's fundraising live stream. This is a quick reminder for you to click the link in our description box and go donate to our COVID-19 crowdfunding campaign in association with Give India, Uplift, and the Ujala Foundation.
Thank you guys. Thank you for having us. This was super fun. And everyone watching, please do donate. That's the little bit that you can do. So that at least, 5 years down the line, when you look back to like, there was a pandemic, what did I do? Well, you have an answer for that. Guilt is a great driver. Yeah.